I'm just waiting for it to appear. Okay, we are live with the Pilgrim's Book Club here at Sherlock and Pages. I am joined by Andrew Miller. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure, Luke. Lovely to be here.
And I just want to invite people in the chat to write where they're joining from. And if you've got questions throughout the session, I will try and field them as ever. Be patient with me. I'll do my best job. We got quite a lot of questions for Andrew already, but I did just want to say to everyone who's joining, I really didn't think we'd get Andrew to join us today because Andrew, this is your 10th novel, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Won the Walter Scott Prize,
Mm.
Booker shortlist, uh, multiple accolades. But as it turns out, I pick the book and then I get a text from my colleague Kerry who says to me that you'd walked into Sherlock and Pages and had a lovely chat with her. And I was
That's
just,
right. That's right. No, it's in my little local town of Frome, the bookshop, and I mean, it's just a gorgeous little jewel, isn't it, of a shop? So, it's sometimes you go into an enormous bookshop, and it's a kind of, I mean, it's just overwhelming. And to go into a bookshop that's basically a room, and and everything's very carefully chosen and so on, and it's very sweet somehow. You're going to find something. You're going to find something for sure.
oh, well, thank you for that, Andrew. And hopefully I'll see you there over many years to come and be able to pick your brains over some books. And hopefully we'll be able to get into a bit of that today.
Mm,
To start with, I wanted to introduce you to the readers. Obviously, we mentioned that I think this is your 10th novel. You've been writing for a long time now, first novel published in 1997. Did
yeah.
you always want to write, Andrew? What was your way into becoming a novelist? Because it's quite a rare and unusual undertaking in life.
A rare and unusual thing. Yeah, I mean, I decided I wanted to write when I was 18. I was just finishing my A levels, and I was reading D.H. Lawrence's The Rainbow. I wonder if anyone's knows that particular book. Lawrence was slightly fallen out of favor for reasons that I don't think for any good reasons really. But it's anyway. But I was so excited by this that I remember just standing up in my bedroom. I mean, I was completely alone, and just having I think probably the only moment in my life of this kind, sort of just a moment of complete certainty and clarity that this was what I was going to do. How it was done, who knew? Um, uh, Except, of course, you sit down and you start to write stuff, short stories, poetry, and whatever, and that's which is exactly how you need to do it. And that's what I started doing. I moved when I left school. I moved to a little bedsit in my hometown, and a tiny little sort of thing with a cooker in the corner and a fire extinguisher and a disastrous old bed, single bed, and I started to write. So obviously it took a very very long time. I mean, I don't know what I imagined really, um, but I didn't publish anything seriously till I was in my mid 30s. So there's a long period in which I'm trying to sort of get a little bit better at it. So that was, and I did. I mean, I did do, and in the end, I did actually go to. Um, I mean, originally, I didn't. I wasn't going to go to university. I wasn't going to do anything like that. When I left school, I wanted no more to do with any of that. I was so relieved to get out, and then I think I started working. I was working for social services and the health service and so on, doing various jobs, and then uh, I uh, I decided, well, actually, I need to read. I need to read more. And so I went. I need cultural maps. That's what I wanted from university. I wanted cultural maps that would maybe connect things up because I had really no idea. So I saw a thing in the back of a literary magazine called Ambit, which I wonder if anyone has ever seen. It's a slightly kind of rare creature that you can find in certain libraries. And there was a little coupon sort of at the back for it. You didn't. This was all pre-internet.
Mm.
And I just kind of Middlesex Polytechnic, which is in North London, would take on sort of no-hopers of one kind or another. Why not apply? So I did, and they did take me on eventually. I talked my way in. They made me write an essay on D.H. Lawrence, which was kind of funny. And so then they took me on, and then I did later on. I did the UEA course, the I mean, quite a lot later on, years and years later on. I did that course in Norwich, the University of East Anglia course with Malcolm Bradbury and Rose Tremaine. It was quite nice then because actually it was very informal. There were very small group of us, 9 of us, and there was no formal teaching really of any kind. We just kind of workshopped stuff, and I don't know what we did really. Full of pubs, Norwich, so we did a lot of that, and bickered a little bit. But it's so I did that, and then I did a PhD in writing as well, because I was using basically the university system as my patrons. You know, the Earl of Southampton wasn't available, so I used the British Academy as it was then, a very strange semi-secretive organization with a sort of very curious address, which I've always remembered, which was something like Government Building, Spur 5, Honeypot Lane, Middlesex, which is a very curious sort of mixture of sort of Winnie the Pooh and George Orwell. But then they gave me a little bit of money for keeping going, and so I used the system a little bit. I had no intentions of doing anything academic. I did the second PhD, I think, in creative writing in the country. Because it was big resistance from the academic community. They didn't really like this idea at all. So my professor made me finish it because he kind of needed someone to finish. So I did a bit of that, and then I was doing other jobs, of course, as people do, as writers do. You do all kinds of different things, and to try to keep the wolf from the door. And then I finally finished this book, Ingenious Pain, in living in a sort of icy cold flat in Bath, in the Circus in Bath. Everybody knows the city. It's a really, really beautiful place, a sort of Georgian sort of circus, and it's and I somehow had this place for more or less nothing. But it had nothing in it. It had nothing. There's no cookers, no fridge, nothing, no heating, no nothing. But it was very cheap, and it was a very beautiful place. So I finished the novel there, sent it off in the way that you did in those days. I mean, this is all pre-internet, so you just had to go through, read down the list of agents and stuff. And I picked these people out based on not much, sent it off, in a big parcel. You didn't just press send. You actually sent the physical beast off. I had it bound, two sort of lumps, that went off to the agents. And then, of course, I had nothing for weeks, and I think months. I used to call them up, and somebody who sounded about 11 years old would answer the phone and say, everybody's on some sort of skiing holiday, and call back later. So and then eventually a letter comes from an agent saying, hey, I just found your manuscript, and do you want to sign up? And actually, quite recently, I bumped into somebody at a reading I was doing in wherever it was, and she came and said, I was the assistant at that agency who took the thing off the slush pile, which they call the slush pile, where all the unsolicited manuscripts go. And they used to take it home at the weekend, take a few of them home. And she said, I was the one who found you. So
Wow.
I kind of gave her a hug, So I signed up with this agent, and then 2 weeks later, it came to the depth of winter. I was actually in a sleeping bag, writing in a sleeping bag. The phone rang, and he said, we got an auction going, and then life changed, very rapidly.
I think it's really important for people to hear stories like this, because I see on social media now a lot of discussions from aspiring writers about, gatekeepers and how difficult it is. Now, of course, some people have advantages that others don't. But I think if you want to be a writer and are determined to do it, often that road is very long and arduous. And I think that what you just said was testament to that. But now you're 10 books in, Andrew, all these years later.
Yeah.
And would you, I was looking at your kind of back catalogue, trying to get a feel for it beforehand. A lot of historical fiction, but you
Mm.
tend to move around in different periods. And how would you describe your writing to people who don't know it? Would you say that there's anything that unites it? What particularly interests? What has particularly interested you over the years, or do you
Yeah.
feel that you would be putting a fake, you know, lens of hindsight onto that huge amount of work over so many years?
I mean, thanks. Look, there must be things that connect it. I mean, I connect it in some way, to the extent that I am the same creature that started this, which is of course debatable. But it's so there must be some kind of connection. I mean, I think there are certain things that the writing tends to sort of be interested in, and the physical. I think that's very much, the physical world, um, and which is something your wonderful bookshop is kind of interested in, isn't it? The sort of the stuff in the
Absolutely.
physical world. Um, so I'm always I remember my father who was not a guy to read novels or think about anything like. He's a doctor, a Scottish doctor, um, so he's Scots-Irish, and who was slightly mystified by this thing that I did, and said to me one time, he said, "Why are so many people, you know, going to the loo, son? Or whatever, however he put it." And I thought, "Oh, are they?" But I think possibly he was thinking that there's a scene in the beginning of my first novel where the Reverend is sat on his commode while he thinks about his friend, and I do it, but it's partly this my trying to sort of root people in those physical realities of their life. There are other physical realities other than sitting on the john, but it's food is a big thing for me. Clothes is a big thing. Weather. I'm more than slightly obsessed with weather. Landscape. Uh, so all those things are very much kind of, in a sense, almost how I orientate myself in whatever world I'm giving rise to. So that's a
Yeah.
big part of it. Yeah, and I suppose the other thing that goes on is identity, the nature of our understanding of who we are, um, the inadequacy of that, the sort of um, I'm very interested in how identity is how fragile it is, um, uh, and how we are sort of composite in my understanding. Other people have different ideas. I'm very much a non-essentialist, I guess. I mean, I don't see people, including characters in novels, as having a kind of uh, nuggety center to them. I see them as something more like light on water,
Mm.
and so it's always a kind of it's an exploration of that. I think of identity. In my novel Pure, set in France before the Revolution, the French Revolution, uh, the central character goes to sleep at night reciting certain things about himself, his name, what he does in life, where he comes from. And at some point he's hit very hard on the head with a brass ruler. He's an engineer. And that all goes. It's all just goes, and he has a moment of, in a sense, where he's freer, because that's my other thing I'm interested in. I'm interested in how free we might be if we could drop a lot of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, and that might be a very interesting place to be, such as it is explored in various kind of things, sort of Buddhism, and is explored in certain therapies, the kind of sort of fertile void, the thing that's the emptiness, where actually something much more interesting. Um, we talked to novelists, storytellers, blah blah, storytellers, and I tend to think, yes, but also stories are traps, and when I write a story, I want also to escape from a story. So it's for me, there's always a big element of that, like how do I sort of sabotage this thing I'm doing, while actually keeping going and
I'm
doing it.
I'm kind of not surprised to hear you say that, just having absorbed the Land in Winter, because it is so delicately handled. And I was thinking, where's this going? And it kind of doesn't go through doors that maybe you think it will at certain times. And I think that's a very interesting experience. You've mentioned Pure there, Andrew, and I'm thinking we should get a few more books in for the shop.
Mm.
Certainly, you've seen how small we are, so you have to be very
Mm.
careful.
There's room for Pure.
Just before we go further into the Land in Winter, are there any novels that you're particularly fond of that you feel that you'd like to direct readers into, or are they all kind of you move on, or what's your attitude to your kind of catalogue?
To my stuff, yeah, I mean, I mean, I've done basically, okay, there's historical stuff, or what might be labeled as such, and that's sort of half of it, and the other half is sort of not. This one, the Land in Winter, is kind of somewhere between the two. I mean, it did win a prize for historical figure. In fact, it won two of
Mm,
them, but it's so it counts, but it's only just.
mm.
The Walter Scott Prize has this thing about 60 years before publication.
Oh, right,
It
okay.
counts as a so, and that's based on the beginning of a Walter Scott novel. It
Uh,
was 60 years ago today, blah blah. So it's but it's also, it's in my lifetime, so, and I'm not, 200 years old. So it's although some mornings I feel that, but um so it's that one's slightly sort of on the bridge there between the two. But so, it really is just a case of what people might be into. Um and I don't know, do I have favorites? I don't really have favorites. Sometimes the ones you feel protective about, certain ones you think perhaps didn't get a fair shot, were just not
yeah.
really, when you've got 10, obviously some of them just was quite quiet, and others got plenty of attention, and so it's the ones that sort of perhaps, so I don't know. I mean, I wrote a book called The Crossing, which was after Pure, when I thought I can write anything now, because at least for the next one they'll publish it, because Pure won some big prizes. So I thought, I'll write something mad, and it was kind of mad, um, but I really like it for that. I mean, it does go slightly um, off the rails in the last sort of fifth, but the rest of it I think is kind of interesting, because I just was taking, these big sort of, I was just kind of, it was very free. I wrote it in a state of being lost. I would confront the manuscript with this kind of deep sense of, I don't know what happens here, or what this is even. But that makes it quite interesting. So there are, yeah, uh,
Well, I
there are
think
that's yeah. Go on.
no, that gives some food for thought in terms of when people are digging through some of Andrew's work. As a bookseller, it's difficult recommending novels because there's no novel that I've recommended where I haven't had at least one person come back and go, "Oh, no, that wasn't for
Mm,
me." I mean, it could be anything, but then maybe you get nine out of 10 and they really love it. I mean, that would be extraordinary. But I kind of always warn people. I said, "Well, I liked it and other people liked it, but that doesn't mean you will like it." So, but people who enjoyed The Land in Winter seem to really, really get on with it. And I think it's kind of struck a chord, certainly. One of the big question, Andrew, that people had, a few people
mm.
asked this, and one of our readers just put it simply: where and when did the initial spark of the idea for this beautiful book come from? So I'll just leave you with that.
Okay. Yeah, initial sparks are always very difficult to, I mean, the nature of sparks, they don't hang around. So it's, I mean, a novel comes out of not one impulse but several. I think that's one important thing to sort of to say. And so this came out of, I don't know, wanting a certain kind of novel apart from anything else. I mean, apart from sort of um, what you're always looking for in a a subject is something that will draw the writing out of you, something that will make you write. My first novel was 18th century medicine. It wasn't that I had some kind of overwhelming interest in 18th century medicine, but something about that world brought right enabled me to write in a way that something else perhaps wouldn't have done. So with The Land in Winter, I wanted a certain kind of novel. I had just finished a first person narrative, didn't want to do that again. I wanted something, so that was one thing, a third person, quite free. I wanted it to be very, very character driven, and for the characters themselves to not, be bullied by me into sort of illustrating some kind of theme that I had in mind. In fact, I had no idea of what thematically I was setting out to do. But also it was a sense of sort of reaching back to the very, very, very beginning of my life. Um, because I was born in 1960. The book is set 62, 63. I don't remember 62, 63, if I'm honest, but I was there. So there was a sense of actually just reaching back as far as I possibly could in my own little existence to try to touch something there. Um, I was also found myself leaning very heavily into what I knew of the youngish married life of my parents and of their kind of crowd, uh, in that period. Um, and as I began to find out more and more about the 62, 63, I mean, okay, the winter itself is wonderfully kind of theatrical. Everything changes very suddenly, um, and that itself is, and just it's just great to write about snow, frankly.
Do, do,
And go on.
do you know, Andrew, if someone mentioned that the Great Freeze of 62, 63, or was it just in your kind of cultural memory from, hearing about
Yeah,
it as a child?
yeah. No, it was in my cultural memory. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I don't know when I first heard about it. Probably, all my life I seem to have known about it. And people of a certain age, um, you know, we know about it. So
Well,
it's
that's the
go on,
thing.
sorry.
It's kicked off a lot of conversations in the
Mm,
shop with,
mm,
I'll use your words, people of a certain age, who lived through this, and all of them have incredible and often traumatic stories. Nothing too bad so far that we've had, but all of them have their stories. I'm just wondering on the characters then, because you said you
mm,
wanted it to be a certain type of novel, but you said something interesting. You didn't want to bully the characters.
mm.
So we've got Rita and Bill, and
Yeah,
they actually both couples kind of straddle class divides that are really
yeah.
nuanced. So I won't go into it here because we probably don't have time. And we have people joining from all over the world. So I think for them, I think it'd be really interesting, sort of observing this deeply kind of British awareness of just quite where you are on the social strata. But you've got Rita and Bill and Irene and Eric. Did they come to you formed in any manner? I won't say fully formed, but sort of, did you have did they just appear, or are they very designed, very intentional sort of characters? How does that work with
Yeah.
you?
I mean, the doctor and his wife, they are loosely based on my father and my mother. I think I could put that in a sort of slightly more sort of obscure way, but I might as well just say it like that. Without in any way wanting to sort of give a portrait. I mean, my father wasn't from Manchester. His father wasn't, working for the railways or anything like that. So there's a great deal that has nothing to do with my parents. But my father was a country doctor. Um, Eric Parry is a country doctor, and there's and then his wife Irene. But I was drawing on my mother's kind of sort of upper middle class kind of origins, because there's all these little gradations, and but a sort of slightly anxious and fragile upper middle class. There wasn't really much behind it. There wasn't really much money. So it was a case of keeping up appearances and a slightly anxious kind of atmosphere as a result of that. So and also that, because it was the sort of the middle class women of this period who's had perhaps the greatest sort of limitations in terms of what they might hope to do, um, and uh, and the fiction of that period of the sort of the late 50s, early 60s is full of novels by women writing about women going mad in their very nice houses, because they're dying of boredom, they're entirely sort of, but it's obviously it's about to change. So yeah, and the other two on the other side of the other couple, because two couples, the other couple, they're they're a little stranger. I mean, Rita, I think, slightly came out from reading about people like Mandy Rice Davis, who was a young, very, very young woman involved in a big scandal in that period in the early 60s, which, again, for people of a certain age, is a very well known, very big scandal. It brought down the government effectively, uh, and she was a sort of working class girl who was had connections. I mean, Christine Keeler was the other one. These two girls who were friends, and so Rita's kind of from that sort of milieu. She's a working class girl who has been slightly living in the demi-monde, and the sort of the club world, whereas they say in the novel, there's a sort of mixed clientele, and it's so she comes from there. Bill, I guess I was drawing on, again, I'm thinking of characters who are well known to people who know the period. Someone like the famous slum landlord Rackman, um, who is a sort of man from sort of, well, who knows where he was from, really? Maybe some sort of Poland, Ukraine, somewhere, but who came to Britain, and he's a more complicated figure than is usually acknowledged, actually. But so I wondered if he had a son, he might be a bit like Bill. He had a son who he sort of sent to a minor English public school, um, uh, and he might end up with someone like Bill. So Bill and Rita, they're not really meant to be dairy farmers. They're not really cut out for it. And yet that's actually what they find them, for various reasons, find themselves doing, which is kind of just one of the fun things I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of just set these two up in a situation where they were very definitely not really at home, and see how they managed.
It sounds, listening to you, I know how difficult writing is, and writing fiction is something I've done very badly and never published. So I know how arduous it can be, but there seems to be a tinge of real joy and play on the edge of your words, which is wonderful to hear. And Rita was definitely the most liked character, from what I've heard from other readers. I don't know if people in the chat think the same, that they sort of had an affinity with Rita. But is it important to you that the characters elicit strong emotions? Because it was what I was thinking was, a lot of these characters are so real, they're so ambiguous, which isn't often the case in fiction. All the human flaws are there, and I'm kind of wondering, how much are you thinking about this during the writing process, on the sort of moral temperament of the kind of characters?
Yeah, I mean, it's the moral temperament. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, uh, I am thinking about it. I mean, the Doctor is a kind of very obvious one, because uh, he's the one who most obviously misbehaves, and who we might well decide this is a bad man. My editor said to me, "Oh, he's a monster, isn't he? He's a monster." I remember thinking, I'm not sure
I
he's a
didn't
monster.
feel that.
No, but some people do think that. So,
Well,
there are people who feel that he's
or
really beyond the pale. But I wanted and because I was aware that that was, people wouldn't like some of the things he was doing at all. Um, I set that against his professional life as a doctor, where he
Mm.
is a good, there he's a good man. He's compassionate. He cares about his patients, and I think it's very possible to for that to be the case. That one can have an area of one's life where one is, I don't know, constructed a sort of narrative that permits one to behave actually incredibly poorly, while in another part of one's life, one is actually actively good. you know,
Mm.
I mean, and a good doctor is just uncomplicatedly a good and useful person. So he's that. I mean, I think there are probably extremes, but I mean, I don't know. You look at sort of some of the things that really, really terrible people have done. I'm thinking like sort of leaders of in Nazi Germany. Their family lives. They're sort of very tender with their kids and so on, and then outside the house they're doing unspeakable things. I mean, obviously we're not in that territory with the doctor, but I think it's quite possible for and I said, like, I'm not an essentialist. I don't believe in a single sort of unitary self. So I think it's quite possible for these very different things to live in the same
Oh,
inside the same
entirely.
life. Yeah.
And that's why I try and be quite forgiving with myself
Mm.
and with others.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a good kind of point to direct into a big question, Andrew, and forgive me for asking such a big question. But I think just after the discussion of those characters, I have written down what do you see the role of literature in society as being? Do you think that's changed from when you were first starting out in writing, when you first stood up with that D.H. Lawrence in a
Mhm.
moment of great excitement, and to today?
You know what? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And the beauty of Lawrence, of D.H. Lawrence, and I say, I know probably a lot of people haven't read him, and he's sort of he used to be on the school curriculum, and so on, and now pretty definitely not. I mean, I don't think he's been on the curriculum for many years, but um, and he does bang on a bit, but he's he makes literature, novels, the writing of fiction, something, for him, this was something of immense significance and importance, and it's how we would. It was like his politics, in a sense. It's how we would change things, not in a narrow political sense, but how, in some really fundamental way, that was, but perhaps can also be thought of as political. But how we would just be better. How this would. So I say the thing that Lawrence, he can be a little preachy and so on, and I'm not interested in that myself. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything like that. But somehow literature, um, I think I think it does things that nothing else can. Fiction, novels, short stories, etc. They do something that nothing else can. I love cinema. I love the theater and so on. It doesn't replace anything, and podcasts don't, and newspapers don't. And there's something. I say it's like literature is the deep news about the lives of others. It turns out to be the deep news about your own when it's good,. When it's worth a damn. And I think we need that because I think we're also. This goes for art in general. You've asked a big question, so you're getting a big answer. But so we are quite lost. Sometimes in a sort of quite excited way, sometimes in quite a fearful way. Our sense of ourselves and of our lives is quite sort of I don't know, stroboscopic. It's sort of flickery, and we need something that helps us to know ourselves, to see ourselves, to be. We need the sort of stillness and sanity that can bring, even if it's just momentary. Um, and it's because otherwise I think we are just quite lost and it can't just be me. So it's so I think literature brings that. Literature is also, I mean, it does more than one job. I mean, literature is also very importantly one of the key ways in which people, think about the world. Just to think about people's behavior, think about what what we should value, what's important, um, what might we, how might we live differently, both individually and as a society. It's an important part of how we think about stuff. And that's a really obviously value. It's a school of empathy. It's a school of empathy. Clearly, because it's that nothing else will take you inside the mind of another in the same way. I don't think anything else can do that. Um, and and I think that's why people will keep on wanting, looking for like serious fiction, serious writing. Because I say nothing else can replace that.
I
Um,
was
so that was
listening
several
to that
answers. Yeah. Mm.
with great interest, Andrew, and I think tomorrow I'll have to get my pen out and try and capture some of that because it's this National Year of Reading, and I'm a little bit
Mm.
skeptical of these sort of, well, it's World Book Day, isn't it? Which is
Yeah.
really, really important for children's literature. So I think that should be said, and it's a really big thing here in Britain. So, but I am a little skeptical at times about sort of having, this month, that year, this day, and does
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really change things? But I
Yeah.
do think that there is a increasing awareness that, that time of engaging with particularly literary fiction is being reduced, and particularly amongst young men. And I think if I could try and capture some of that and share it with people to bang the drum for reading, for literature,
Yeah.
then hopefully I could capture some of your articulate voice. That would be for the best. Moving off from that kind of rallying call, inspirational stuff, I have been asked, and I want to make sure we get to this. A reader said, please do ask about the writing process that Andrew goes through. And we've already been there a little bit, but when I was reading the book, I was kind of taken by the depth of knowledge that you had on quite obscure topics, um, medical research, farming. I know that you thanked your agent at the end for saying keep it weird, because
Mm.
there are these quite obscure references. So I want to know, how do you do that, and how important is it to you that you're accurate to the time? In the sense that I wondered, the films and the books that Rita is into, like this
Yeah.
quite strange
Yeah.
sci-fi stuff, is were they real books and films, or is do
The
you
sci-fi stuff, the
yeah.
sci-fi films. Yeah. No, they're all real, and we're all at the time. So yeah, I try to get that sort of stuff right. I mean, the researching stuff has obviously changed. I say I started doing things pre-internet, um, and now obviously, I look stuff up online. Not entirely. I also go to the British Library. I do things like that. But it is actually kind of incredible that you can just look up stuff. I mean, it worries me slightly this because I think there is an element of it being slightly mixed blessing, um,
Mm,
because whereas once I would have just I don't know, I would have found out what I could and then maybe taken a few educated guesses. And maybe there was more space for the imagination and for sort of play and invention and so on. And now now it seems like pretty much everything is, can be Googled and so on. So you do it because if you don't, somebody, the person reviewing the book does it, and says,
mm.
I think you'll find
I see what
that
you're
that's
saying.
actually
Yeah.
not quite right. So it's with slightly sort of I have slightly mixed feelings about it, but I do, yeah. But it does mean also that I can check what science fiction films were around in sort of 1959, 1960, and there was some very interesting and weird stuff around. And you can even just get to watch them, some sort of mad 50s stuff, with these kind of boy, oh boy, it is incredible stuff. Very crude in some ways, but and quite, I don't know, quite druggy too. It's just sort of very, very mad. Make you wonder what they were on. But
I think
so it's and also quite a lot of stuff coming from unexpected places, from sort of Eastern Europe and so on, where producing some very odd things are to do with space and endless threats from outside, in this, because it's nearly always that. It's nearly always this idea of being menaced by, and then we have to somehow kill it, whatever it is.
well, yeah, I think it's in those details that you sort of start to get a worldview, a psychological
mm,
world
mm,
of of the characters, and it all brings together that picture. Um, and it's quite interesting because I'm thinking about when I was born. I have the tail end, just the very tail end, the cultural memory of kind of nuclear crisis and
mm,
worry and concern about um, nuclear warfare, Soviet Union, and stuff like that. And it would be
mm,
in the tiny details that you would find this stuff out, but then also whole wider kind of cultural paraphernalia. I think what you did, and it's quite um, it's quite difficult at times. I think you capture the kind of drudgery of gender norms at that time
mm,
really, really well. And even if men are not, not totally evil men, they're not, maybe not even bad men, maybe they're actually quite all right, but they still have sort of their moments, and there are, received roles for, women and men in marriage. And it's a little bit kind of depressing at times in that
mm,
sense.
mm.
Was this something that you set out to do from the start of the novel, that you knew would be, you know, a theme as such? Because for me, it was a bit of a kind of a stock take on a generation that was meant to be liberalized so much, open up, be so modern, and be progressive. It is the kind of the nascent swinging 60s. Things are
Mm,
changing a little bit
mm.
in the novel, and yet there's so much kind of little kind of tension. And if you know what I'm saying, was this something that you
Yeah.
intended, or did you just uncover it in the writing?
Yeah, I mean it's just so much a fiction, because this is still, this is 62, so it's women's roles, the roles, marriage is still pretty traditional, pretty conservative. The whole thing of, getting divorced. My parents divorced in 64. It was quite I remember at school, it was the headmaster actually called my mother into the school to talk to her about it. It
Oh,
was kind of, we it was a slightly, worrying thing, and a bit scandalous. So yeah, it was. I mean, when one looks back at a period like 1962, there are, it wasn't one thing, it wasn't 10 things, it was many, many things. But and so, and we got four people here, two couples. So, this is not a complete picture of an era, but I think the marriage that the doctor and his wife have, is not particularly unlike, as far as I understand it, the marriage that my parents had. And my father was, very definitely didn't really want my mother to step outside of, the roles, of a traditional wife and mother. And she hoped to be more involved in his work in some way, and I think he wanted a kind of clear divide, and he'd been brought up in this is what people, surprise, surprise, they're brought up that
mhm.
way, and to change is difficult. And the 60s is going to create change. And it's actually, of course, it also then enabled a lot of men to behave even far worse than they'd been before. And so it's not as if everything just kind of was sorted out. But there was, I think, for perhaps slightly younger people than the characters that I'm dealing with, who are in their late 20s, early 30s. But for the younger ones, there is definitely a feeling as we get into the 60s that they can live differently, and there's an optimism. And this maybe was an optimism. It was felt by boys and girls, but obviously the situation for girls and for women was one that there was more to gain in a sense.
Yeah.
It's another long and big debate to the extent of in the 70s we get a big second wave feminist stuff. I mean, this is going on in the 60s too, of course. Some really strong voices speaking up, and it becomes pretty militant in the 70s. And as also, though, the sort of strange optimism that the 60s had, I think, at its best, starts to drain away quite, by the mid 70s. We get into something sort of slightly more paranoid, sort of feeling it. So it's all quite brief, this period of opening up.
It's interesting hearing all this and then reflecting actually on what you said earlier about the role of literature, because I'm thinking, obviously we all want to be better people. Not many people wake up and think, well, I want to be a worse person. And if everyone else is anything like me, you're always constantly disappointed as well. But that's the importance of reading literature, isn't it? Because it kind of holds up that mirror, as you say, this is me and I am them. Thank you for sharing that, Andrew. Before we've raced on in time and we won't keep you much longer. I know you've been so busy, but there are a couple of questions I want to get to, Andrew.
Sure.
To leave The Land in Winter, a reader said, loved your book because the characters were so well drawn. And I think we've discussed that. Are you writing a sequel? Are you done with these characters now? Or are you tempted to sort of regenerate them?
I don't do sequels really. I just, when you've spent 3 years, or the best part of 3 years really, with a particular set of people and a particular world, and you've given it so much, you basically, if you're going to do this, you have to give it all that you have to give, and day after day, week after week, month after month, and stay with it, and then in a kind of strange rush towards the end, you'll know this, it's kind of done. It's like, what I say, books always end with a phone call from the assistant editor, like saying, should we capitalize this, do you think? And something, 2 or 3 very small questions, just and when and I used to be, now it's done by email probably, but it used to be on the phone, and then you put the phone down and you think, oh, it just finished. That's it. It's done. And it's that's a kind of so it's so where were we going with this?
No, that was the question. I mean, they want to know if you're moving on. And I suppose
I'm doing something completely different. Yeah.
On to wrap up The Land in Winter, Robert Middleton in the chat asks, what is your most special winter memory, Andrew? We've already had a few actually in this, and as someone who's obsessed with the weather, I think there's probably a few. But
my favorite winter memory, I mean, I don't remember the winter of 62, 63, but it's just before it's that part of that childhood amnesia thing, which is so strange. So for me, I mean, I could actually, I was caught up in the Peak District just a few years ago. Incredibly helpful, because I was just starting to write this novel, and I wanted snow. I needed snow. I needed like loads of snow. I needed blizzards, and the gods obliged, as they sometimes do with these things, quite often, in fact. And we had this. I was on a Buddhist, a silent Buddhist retreat, kind of quite.
I was going to say, Andrew, you look incredibly healthy. Maybe this is why.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did this thing, and then the snow started to come down, and it really came down, and it blew an absolute hoolie. And I did sort of think, yes, I need actually to get off my mat now and get outside and just trudge, and it's amazing how quickly, you sort of. I went for a walk into it's quite a wild area out there, the Peak District. you shouldn't really fool around with it. And quite soon, you sort of look back and think, I can't actually see where I just came from. I can't see the road, and I'm up to my thighs in snow here. And it's hard work moving through snow,
Oh,
so actually it was fantastically useful, uh, and
well, Andrew,
slightly
I
unnerving. Yeah.
I'm from Derbyshire. My
Ah.
mum worked in North Derbyshire as a on call nurse often, and was dug out by and helped by farmers, and we'd be ever so worried when she was out in the snow. And I've
Mm.
actually got a recording of their house. It was -21, -22
Wow.
outside.
Wow.
It
Wow.
does get wild up there. So it's
Yeah.
thanks
No,
for sharing that actually. I
no,
have a
it's
really good picture of that in my mind. Um, uh, someone in the chat just said every one of the characters could have their own novel, but I think that that's probably the skill of the novel. We'll leave it there as you are. But before we leave you, Andrew, I did want to ask. We've talked about D.H. Lawrence, but what works have inspired you? Ones that you feel capture, kind of the art of the novel. And I know as someone as yourself, there must be hundreds and hundreds that you have in mind. But if there was just one or two that you could share with our readers that might point them in a direction of value and enrichment, then that would be very kind of you. And if I could
yeah.
just say, when I read The Land in Winter, um, I don't know what you think of this because you you might not like it yourself, but I was reminded of Alan Hollinghurst's writing. The Line of Beauty being a particular
Mm, mm, mm.
favourite of mine. I just thought I'd share that with you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I can confess I've never read Alan. I know him actually, but I've never actually read his read his stuff. Don't tell him. Don't
Oh,
tell him.
maybe one for the future.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So yeah, no, I know he's a fine writer too, and a nice guy. So yeah, I mean, I was talking about some books this morning actually on a podcast, and it's um so I happen to have them here. Uh, One that you can't actually see that now, can you? Oh, there it is. You can
Oh
see
yeah,
that perhaps. That is The
mm,
Ice Palace by
yeah,
Taji Versas, a Norwegian writer, no longer with us. Little book, nice little book. You could squeeze that into your beautiful little shop.
you could.
Um,
I'm
and
making
it's an astonishing little story about a friendship between two girls in a Norwegian winter. Um, of they're both 11, or maybe they're 12 actually, and there's that kind of intensity that young girls can have. They don't even understand themselves what this power is that's holding them, you know, so close. And then one of them disappears, um, and the other is left to, well, to search and then to grieve. And it's like a fairy tale, although it is this is we're in sort of, Telemark in Norway, basically, somewhere in that area. And it's beautiful, strange, unsettling, gorgeous book. Not everyone loves it, but I think most people who get their hands on this are blown away by it. Um,
Kerry, who you met in the shop, will love that.
yeah,
I will
Yeah,
down.
no, it's I think it's solid, and it's and I just another one here which I happen to have. This is
Ah,
Penelope Fitzgerald, The Blue Flower. I think Penelope Fitzgerald is among the very, very best uh, British writers of the second half of the 20th century. She should be. She's so grown up, she's so grown up. And she's also very funny, and she's very wise, and and uh, uh, and her writing she writes. This is actually one of the bigger ones, but most of her books are quite about half the length of this one. She wrote yeah, all sorts of the first part of her. She didn't start writing until she was 60. Didn't start writing fiction until she was I think in her
oh,
60s.
wow.
So she does sort of half a dozen novels very closely based on her lived experience, and then she does these four sort of historical novels, which are astonishing and really set the bar for. Um, if she's as good as Hilary Mantel, put it that way. She's very different from Hilary Mantel, although they both have something uncanny about them. They both have something really uncanny about them. but Penelope Fitzgerald tends to do uncanny in sort of 180 pages, whereas, as we know, Hilary Mantel, not always, but working on a bigger scale. But there's a couple there. There's a couple. Is that
I was
okay?
thinking of Hilary Mantel when you mentioned your pre-revolutionary France work. Pure, is that Pure?
Yeah,
I
that's
think
Pure.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to take a look at
that's
that,
Pure.
Andrew, now. And yeah, Penelope Fitzgerald. I've got to make sure we've got some in the shop. I'll do a double check. We'll do a little bit of a.
She's very special. She's very special. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing so much with us, Andrew. For those who don't know, Andrew is like full promo mode. You've been in Italy, going to Dublin. I really appreciate it, Andrew. And if we could all say thank you to Andrew in the chat. But Andrew, I hope to meet you in the shop at some time soon, maybe once things have calmed down a little bit. Thank you for walking in that day. Thank you for making my life easy, and it's really, really appreciated. I got a lot of value from this myself.
No, it's great, Luke. No, it's great, and we will of course meet in the shop because I should be going up and down that hill that you know very well, and we will certainly, maybe we'll scoot up to Moo and Two, whatever it's called, and have a coffee. Lovely. Thanks for having me on. Thanks to I haven't been able to see the people there. I'm taking your word for the fact that they are there.
They're all saying thank you now.
And just a big hello and good evening from South Somerset to all of you.
Cheers, Andrew. I'll let you go now. I'll stay on and then I'll end the stream.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers. What a lovely chat. And now I will end the live stream.